Sorry about that. But yeah, I'm gonna record this so that we can for next time. Okay, so if you're in Inkscape, this is usually what comes up. You might not have this bar off to the right. These are different windows that you can use. You might have, these are all snaps on the right side. You guys might have different configurations. You can customize this how you want. But the biggest thing you're going to use is all of these things on the left. You might use some color stuff on the bottom, and of course all the file drop-downs. So first thing we're going to do, I usually start by teaching how to draw an object. And we're going to click this square, this rectangle. You can also see in the hover over text, you can just press F4. So as you start to do this a lot, as you use the functions a lot, you'll pick up the hotkeys that you really like to use. So now you might memorize that F4 is just create rectangles and squares. And we're going to go ahead and just draw a rectangle of some kind. All right. And I'm gonna keep going through the process here. Put in the chat if you want me to slow down or backtrack at all. It's kind of difficult to get a gauge of where everyone is if there's no voice. Okay. After drawing this, you'll notice there's a few different tabs. I can take this. It's called a handle. I can take that handle and move it around. Take that handle, move it around, and just keeps it in the same shape as a rectangle. This will round out the edges to whatever degree I want, and I can take two of them and give a somewhat asymmetric curvature there. Next thing you might want to do is move it, is translate this, or rotate it, or do something to the square. So we're going to go ahead and actually select the square, and you can do that by, oh, wait, hold on. You'll notice the cursor is still in rectangle form. So one of your best friends is Control-Z. Just undo that. After making any shape, usually you want to press the button S for select. And you'll notice my cursor changes from the rectangle to the regular cursor. You could also do that by clicking on this top button. This is probably the most important button. Or you could press F1. But it's a good habit to get into. After creating any shape, you just press S. And it's a nice quick return to base, as it were. Okay, so now that I'm in select mode, I can click this, move it around. I can do a bounding box to select. If I do a bounding box that just goes through this, it's not going to select anything. But I can hold the Alt key down and draw a little line. Everything that line hits will select. That's kind of nice. One more thing as a setup, you'll notice this this background. This isn't actually an object. This is just the page. You can get rid of that, and I usually like to get rid of that by going to File and Document Properties, and you can see the hotkey there, Shift Control D. You can't actually see the pop-up on my screen, but if you do it on your screen, you'll see a pop-up. There will be a thing that says Show Page Border. Just toggle that off. And write in the chat if you have any issues with that. Now we've got this infinite plane. We can zoom out and just move to as far over as we can see. You can see these numbers are getting bigger and bigger. We have an infinite possibilities here. So for scale purposes, we can actually select this rectangle, and we can see that it's 292 by 185 millimeters. We can change that to inches and make it like, say, the size of a sheet of paper, width of 8.5 inches by 11 inches, for example. You don't have to do this. It's just so that you know that you don't get lost. And as you're as you're moving around playing with these, you might end up, say, off the screen a little bit. A good way to bring it back to base is to press the number 4, and 4 will zoom, it'll snap directly to whatever, the entire boundary of the drawing. Okay. For other movement things, you can press the plus or the minus sign to zoom in or out. You can also use this little thing off to the right side to set the zoom to a very specific number. But usually you're going to use either the plus or the minus sign or Control and the wheel for a nice smooth zoom in and out. Okay. So Inkscape usually has, for any function, there's a lot of different possibilities, and you'll get the hang of which ones you like the best, and sometimes different situations call for a different function or a different version of it. Okay, so I'm going to take this rectangle, and I'm going to press Control D for duplicate, or I can right-click and click that, duplicate. And it looks like nothing's changed. Something has changed because there's a duplicate and it's directly on top of the original one. Just going to drag that over to the right side. You'll notice my cursor is still in select form, so I don't need to press S. I can continue to duplicate these as much as I want, but I'm gonna keep it at 2. So this one has the same possibilities as the first one. If I double click on that, I go back to the original rectangle function modes. S to go back to select. And you'll notice that there's new handles. There's new options for your handles. You can change the size, the proportions. You can change the width or the height. If you click it a second time, now it goes to rotation mode. And you can rotate. You can hold the Control key down, and it rotates and snaps to 15 degree increments. Like that. You can skew it, like that. You can also change the point of rotation. You see this little plus sign in the middle here. Maybe that's my seat. I don't know. You can move this little plus sign, and now it's going to rotate around that plus sign. Again, at 15 degree increments, if you hold down the Control key. It'll also skew over that specifically. I'm just going to undo a lot of that, so it goes back to this. John, are you still hearing banging? Damn. Anyone else? I don't hear anything. All right. Can you at least hear what I'm saying, though? Okay, good. Okay, is everyone pretty much with me at this point? Good. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is show you. Cool. We're going to select this second rectangle and go to Path, Object to Path, and you can actually you can see the hotkey there, Shift Control C. Click it, and again, it looks like nothing's changed, but something has changed. Before, if I go to this first one, I double click on it, it goes back to this rectangular sort of tethered to certain functions and nothing else. If I double click this one, the handles are a lot different. In fact, it's just the vertices, it's just the corners of this. And if I move one of these, you see that I have a lot more flexibility in where it goes. I can even go outside the boundaries of just a rectangle. So the Inkscape considers this an object, And this is a path. Different beast. And it's used for different things. This is definitely tethered to being rectangular in form, whereas this, you have all sorts of different options. You can add more nodes and play with these as you want. You can curve the segments, you can destroy segments, you can union, you can do difference in Boolean functions, things like that. And I'll go over a lot of those. Okay, so before we delve into paths, I do want to go over circles. So circles are another object. We're going to use the mouse wheel to scroll down a little bit and make another thing, and we'll make another circle. Oop. So you could hover over this. You can press F5. You can draw without pressing any keys, and it might turn into an ellipse. You can hold the Shift key down, and it's going to expand from a single point wherever you started that. You can hold the Control key down, and it snaps it to being a circle. And you can hold the Shift and the Control key down to keep it as a circle from a particular point. And there we go. And you'll find similar handles to the rectangle up here. This will obviously change the height, the width. This changes the circle to an arc. And you'll see a few different buttons up here. If I click this, it would create a pie shape of a sorts. This opens it up again, so it's just the arc rather than the radii also. And then this button on the far right closes it up again. So it becomes a full circle. We're going to keep it as a circle for now. I'm going to press S again to go back to select mode. And I'm going to... Actually, I think this would be a good time to talk about color. So if you're using Inkscape for maybe not necessarily the laser, maybe you're doing a card design or something like that, you're going to have different colors. We can click any of these buttons down here and give it a fill. Oh, a little bit of troubleshooting. Sometimes it comes up semi-transparent. I'll go over the hiccups that can come up in Inkscape, but and give it a fill of some kind, and we can hold the Shift key down and click a different one to give it a border. Now it's a very thin border. And we can change the thickness of the border. You see where it says 0.25. You can right click on that and give that a nice thick border so you can see it a little better. I might give this, I'll just give it a gray fill. Sometimes it's useful if you want a stencil of a sorts to give it a transparency. So you can click on this and you see where it says opacity down here, this O. You can change that to like 50% opacity. And now you can see it's on top of the rectangle, but it's got a transparency or semi-transparency. Change that back to 100. But it's still an object. It's still tethered to being either an arc or a circle or a portion of a pizza, whatever. So I'm going to duplicate that. Control D. Drag that over. And I'm going to go back and do path, object to path, and now I've got 4 nodes. I can start to play around with that amorphous blob there. Okay, so let's play with paths. So these two are objects. These are tethered as rectangles or circles. These are paths. These have the nodes that we can move around. If you take 2 nodes and select them, you have all of these options up at the top. And if you click the far left one, it'll place a new node at the midpoint. So right there in the middle. If you have 3 of them selected, like we do now, and I click this, it puts, hey, come on. What's going on? Awful machine. There we go. It takes all the segments and puts. What is going on? Okay, never mind. Forget that function. It should have put nodes in the middle of each of those, but it's a little wonky right now. Now you can take one of the segments between two nodes and drag it, giving a curvature of sorts, and select a node on one of those curves, on the endpoint of a curve, and you can change the handles to get different types of curves. And that's fun. And that's kind of how, when Inkscape took the circle object and turned it into a curved path, that's kind of what it did with the arcs between these nodes, and sort of just generated that. Okay, so that's that. Next thing I want to go over is Boolean operations. So I'm gonna get rid of these objects because I think you guys have a handle of that now. I'm gonna take these two paths and give this a fill of some kind. There we go, something like that. I'm going to take one of these and put it on top of the other. And you'll notice right now the circle is on top of the rectangle. I can take that circle, I can right click. Nope, that's not it. I can press the end button, home or end. Yeah, I can do that. One sec, John. I'll press the end button and it sends it to the back. I'll press the home button and it brings it all the way up to the top layer. John, to answer your question, to create a rectangle object, it's that button. To create a circle object, it's that button right here. You can create stars and polygons with this one. And then to turn an object into a path, you select it and do path object to path. Or Control-Shift-C. Cool. Okay, so now I've got two paths, one on top of the other, and I can select them both. I can hold the Shift key down and select multiple paths. Or I can create a bounding box that will select them both. Or you can hold the Alt key down and draw a line that will select them both. Everyone with me on that? Cool. I see some thumbs. Actually, is there a way for me to change the layout so I'm seeing more? Yeah, okay. Now I'm seeing two people. This is good. Okay, so I've got these two selected. I'm going to go to Path and Union, and it does exactly what it sounds like. It literally just melds the two together. If I double click on this, it thinks of this as one path. It's no longer two separate shapes. And I can select nodes and move them around. I can do whatever minor tweaks that I want to do. Press Control-Z so you undo what you did. If I select those two again and I click Difference, it takes the top one and it's almost like a cookie cutter. It just goes straight down and it cuts out whatever chunk from the bottom one. I'll undo that. And if I click this and press End, it goes to the back of the stack. I'll do the difference again. And you see the other thing got, the other, whatever was on the top went down. Cool. All right, undo that again. And we're back to base. I'll show you what intersection looks like. Pretty straightforward, just the intersection of those two. You can do exclusion, everything but the intersection. You can do division, and so what happened there was it cookie cut and it kept the areas of whatever was on the bottom. So I can bring this up to the top. Do that. And now I've got this pie chart setup sort of thing. And then another useful thing is cut path, which literally takes the path and slices it wherever the boundaries of the top one were. So another way to cookie cutter it. Now, if you have something like this and you still want it to be a full boundary, you could double click to go into path mode, select two nodes, and click this button right here. This is 5N from the left side. Join selected end nodes with new segment. Now you've got a new segment. And now this is it's a full circle, which allows you to engrave, for example, in lasering. You also can't really give it a fill unless it's, you kind of can, but it's eh. Yeah. There we go. It's a little better. Okay. So that's Boolean operations. What do you guys think so far? You're all with me? This might be a good opportunity to, if you missed something, ask me. I can show you it again. You can go back to review. Cool. Cool. Okay. Now let's say everything we've done so far. Cool. Thank you, Andy. John. Everything we've done so far, we've taken sort of a package. This is a package on rectangles. No matter what I do with this, it's always going to be a rectangle of some kind. We've turned it into a path, and then we modified it from there. So this is kind of a rough shape, and then we did some fine-tuning with this once it was a path. But we got the basic shape from it, from this function, to create rectangles and squares. We could do a similar thing with the circles, ellipses, and arcs. We could do stars and polygons. So this will create a hexagon, or whatever kind of polygon we want. We could make stars, a little saw thing, kind of fun. But either way, it's still going to be an object until we do object to path, and then we have the ability to change the nodes. But what if we wanted to start with a path? So that's what this does. So draw Bezier curves and straight lines. That's right, John. Yeah, the laser cutter is going to pick up on anything that has a stroke. It doesn't matter what the fill is. So right now, it's going to pick up on this blue curve rather than the gray center. If this didn't have a stroke, if I shift and click this X, the laser wouldn't recognize that at all in any fashion. So and I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to draw Bezier curves and straight lines. And you can make this as complex as you want. With snaps, you can actually use it to trace out something else that's already on there. And that can be useful. Everyone see how that works? And this was done by clicking, releasing, clicking, releasing, clicking, releasing, things like that. If you drew like this, then you'll be placing a point, and then this is kind of weird. I almost never use that, the drag ability of that. Usually I just use it for straight lines, and then I do the fine tuning of curves afterward. But okay, let's say we've got you've got something that you're really fond of. So I'll do a difference there. So let's say you really like the shape, and you want to figure out a rectangle that'll fit right inside there. You'll notice as I dragged it around, there was a little pop-up that came here. This is because I have snaps enabled, but let's say I didn't have snaps enabled, it's very difficult for me to get that right in there. So I'll show you how that works. First off, you want this toggled, snap paths, nodes, and handles. And generally speaking, you want that toggled, like as a standard. If I draw and I have these two toggled, I could just draw like that. I could snap to any points. And I can close it off by clicking the original point. There's no points here, and there's no points here. So we have to get a little bit more creative. One thing that you might do, you could actually just draw a rectangle. And as long as you have snaps enabled, it's just going to go straight to whatever corner you have there. If you really wanted to use the Bezier paths, you could hold the Control key down, and it's going to snap that to 15-degree increments. And as long as this first, I guess, second button down is toggled, you can. Oh, come on. There we go. You can snap it at 90 degrees right to the path. So now I know that this is 90 degrees. It hits directly here. I'll plop that in the corner here. What we might do is do a quadrilateral like this. Press S. And I can drag this. I can hold the Control key down so it goes straight to the path. It's kind of a clunky way to do it, but it works, and more the point of this is to show you some of the functionality of this. Okay. So next thing I want to show you is the align and distribute functions. This is very useful. I'm going to get rid of this. We've seen snaps, we've seen Boolean operations, some basic objects, things like that. If I have a bunch of squares, I'll plop a circle in there too, or ellipse of some kind. Snaps can get a little disruptive if I just want this maybe a little off. So sometimes it's kind of nice to just turn that off, and then you have more flexibility in where it goes. By the way, these are objects, these aren't paths, but it doesn't matter for our align distribute thing. I'm just going to make these all different colors. That'll be fun. Okay. If I have a whole bunch of objects here and I want to align them on a center line, I'll select them. I'm going to go up to Object and Align and Distribute. It's Control-Shift-A. Yeah, I had it minimized. Here we go. And you'll see all of these things. The ones you'll probably use the most are these two right in the middle. If I click this, center on a horizontal axis, it snaps everything. You'll notice that even in the circle, there's this there's this boundary. So what it's doing is it's taking the center of that square, and it's putting that on the same center line as the center of all the other squares. So even if I had some kind of weird kind of something like this, yeah, that's a terrible drawing. Let's say it's something like that. It'll still have this rectangular boundary, and it'll align everything to the center of that box, regardless of, you know, the center of this box is the same as the center of that box, is the same center line as that box. Okay, and I could press this and align them all on the center axis, on a vertical axis. Now these are all stacked on top of each other, so it's kind of hard to see. But you can change the order by clicking one, pressing the end button, sending it to the back. Maybe this one's slightly larger than the others, so you send it to the back so you can see the rest. Okay. I'll drag those out again. Another function I use quite a bit is the align. So these are all right now centered on a horizontal axis, but there's an overlap here. Maybe I don't want the overlap. Maybe I want the spacing between these to be equal. So I'm going to click this button, make horizontal gaps between objects equal. Click that, and now this distance is the same as this distance, is the same as this distance, it's the same as that one, and that one. You can also align, say, to the left, and what that makes, it makes it so that this distance is the same as this distance is the same as this distance, because it aligns the left sides. You can see that aligns the left bits there. But because we're using shapes of different sizes, it's going to have some overlap. So I'll bring this back to, this is quite a bit nicer. You could also do the centers of the shapes aligned, the right sides, but I think this is usually the most aesthetically pleasing. Okay. Next thing I'd like to go over is transform. So Control-Shift-M, and you'll get this little box here. So we've got a few tabs up at the top. We could select one or two of these objects, and we can move it, say, you know, an inch to the right. Moves it just an inch to the right. Boom. Or, yeah, 0.39 inches. I almost never use that. Usually it's just I align it to something else using snaps. Just because it's typically quicker. But where I really use this box is the scale. So if I want to select one of those and I want it just a little larger, maybe I'm trying to fit a puzzle piece in a box of some kind, and I want it to be a snug fit, but there needs to be a little bit of space. I'll change the width and the height to 110%, and then make it a little larger. Maybe that's too much. Maybe I'll do 101, and just a little nudge. Or the other direction, I want to make it just a little smaller, so 99. I can fine-tune that to what I need. if I select multiple of these, well, what it's going to do, if I do 110% here and I click this, it makes the whole thing kind of blow up from the center of the combined boundary box. As opposed to if I click this button, apply to each object separately, each object kind of blows up at its own rate while keeping its own center point. So you can see that when I do the whole thing here, that's with that toggled. And then if it's not toggled, it keeps the distance between them the same. Rotate is the same sort of thing. I could take one of these and give it 21.39 rotation, or I think I'm gonna mute the no. Yeah. No. I need somebody to mute. John, I think that's you. There we go. Okay. I can take one of these and rotate it either clockwise or counterclockwise, depending on which one of these is toggled. Just like that. And to the same tune, if I have multiple of these selected, it'll rotate while keeping the same relative locations, or I can apply to each object separately and have them do a little choreographed dance. That's fun. Okay. Okay, so grouping is useful. If I have multiple objects and I want to move them around and I don't want to have to do a boundary box every time. Let's say I've got a background, like a white background. And if I try to create a boundary box, well, I have to go outside of that white background. I can't just select inside here because then I move the white background. I can get around that by making it have no fill. So now I click this and there's no fill here. Whereas if there's a white fill, white fill, I can't select within there. But now I can select within there because I gave this box no fill. But let's say I wanted to. I don't want the tedium of having to individually click all of those things, and I have a white background or some kind of background fill that I don't really want to mess with. Well, it would be handy to group your shapes together. So what I can do is select 3 of them, for example, and I can press Control-G for group or right-click and go to group. From now on, if I select any of those shapes, they are grouped together. You'll also notice the transform function considers this as one piece. So if I select these, there's technically 4 objects here. There's 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So if I do a rotation, it's going to rotate. It's going to keep that group as it is relative to itself. I can scale. It's going to keep that group the same. And I can move this around. I can do multiple groups, select multiple things, move them around. If you want to select within a group, you hold the Control key down. So if I select this, I drag, it moves the whole thing. But if I want to move just that one, I hold the Control key down, click, and it keeps the group, but now it's got a different arrangement. You can also control and click a whole bunch of things, holding the Shift key down each time to add on to the thing. Go back to Align Distribute, and change the distribution. You can make it all along the same horizontal line, same vertical line. Send something to the back, and now you've got a nice centered thing. And these are all grouped together still. Okay. There's that. A little more forceful of a combination. So right now, Inkscape is associating these three shapes together, and it's associating these two shapes together. There's a stronger association called combining. I'm going to duplicate this. I'll bring it down here. I'm going to turn all of these into paths because I don't want to mess around with objects anymore. These are all, actual paths. I tore apart the group. I Control Shift G, or you can right click and go to ungroup. I've already done it, so it doesn't appear. But I can right click on this one, go to ungroup, and that's what I did here. Now I've got three separate pieces. I can kind of layer them on top of each other, and if I select them all and click combine, this is a stronger associative function. So instead of just grouping, this actually makes these all one shape. And even if they're separated, they're all one shape. I can change the colors, and this is a much stronger thing. This would be for like your final form typically before you send it off to print. You can maneuver those how you want. The opposite of combining is break apart. So if I have, let's say, it's effectively a Boolean command. It's a little stronger because it also, let's say you have some lines. You can also combine those so they're functionally the same thing. By the way, the way to draw the line is with this button. So I showed you how to use Bezier curves before. The draw freehand lines, similar thing. It's just 2 points, or you can press F6, and it has the same abilities as the Bezier curves. So this is all one shape, and I could take maybe something like that and do a difference function or intersection or whatever you feel is useful. Okay. So it's been about 45 minutes, and I've done a very quick rundown of a lot of the most useful tools in Inkscape. I hope you guys have been able to follow along, but do you have any questions? Actually, I'd like to know what kind of projects you would want to use Inkscape for. I know people want to use the laser cutter and stuff like that, but what ideas do you have in mind? I'll let whoever wants to just jump in. Go ahead. All right, so Andy wants to use the laser cutter. What do you want to use it? Like, what do you want to make? Because I'm thinking to use the last hour or so on projects, and I can help you guys through certain hiccups. Would you be engraving on wood, or is this like a business logo? Oh, okay, cool. Andy's thin wood to make fixture. Nice. Nice. All right. So I'll show you. I'll work with John's first. Let's say thin strips of rubber. So the way I'd approach that is I'd probably start with a strip, of some kind. We'll say, what do you think? 1 inch tall, something like that. And this would literally just be cut lines. Oh yeah, John, do you want to email that to me? I'll put my email address in here. 3 millimeters. It's pretty thin. There we go. And so you see the scales change quite a bit, but I can keep the proportions just by zooming in. Simple round gasket from red silicone foam. Cool. Inkscape's into image. Nice. Okay, David. Yeah, I'll have to show you how to do a trace bitmap function for yours. Cool. Okay, so for John's, we've got this. The laser cutter at the Makerspace will pick up on whatever color is the stroke. So if I set this, usually if I want to cut something, I set it to a red stroke. And like I said earlier, it's not gonna thank you, John. It's not gonna read the fill at all. So the fill is just there for me. I can just set it to a white fill. I'm multitasking right now, so bear with me. For gasket. I wonder if I can just drag that straight in. Yeah, all right, cool. Okay, so this is John's project. 51. Oh, 3 millimeters thick. I see. So this material is 3 mil. This actually came in as paths, it looks like. Yeah, these are straight up paths. So there's no weird thing that needs to be done with it. You could flat out take this. Usually you want to keep your original off to the side, but we're going to strip away everything that's not going to be part of the final cut. Oh. Which I think it's just this. I think that's... Oh, I didn't bring this over. I think it's only this piece that we're keeping. Yeah, so this should be a very direct this should be a very accurate, straight up representation of what you need. So we're going to set that to a red thing just for consistency's sake. Everything's already combined. You could break apart the path if you wanted to oh no, it's grouped. Okay, so it came in with group. So John was asking about scaling. We can flat out set the height of this. So this is 51.07. I'm going to select the whole thing. And it's already 51. Actually, it's John, I think it came in at exactly the right size, or pretty close to it. We're going to set this to 51.07, but we want it to scale the same width as well. We toggle this, it'll keep the same proportion. So height of 5107 mil. There we go. That's it. And then that should be able to cut out very directly with the laser cutter. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And so for the PDF, yeah, Andy, John's graphic did come in as a PDF. And what I did is I just dragged it straight from the desktop. It came up with a pop-up that you can't see, but I'll do a print screen to show you what it looked like. There we go. Just came in like that. I just kept the settings exactly the same, pressed OK, and it came up with this. Simple as that. Cool. Oh, the pop-up is visible. Okay. I think I was using Zoom the other day, and Zoom didn't show that. And then from there, John, depending on how many of these you need to do, you might tile them on the piece of rubber. One useful thing here is control bracket, and that will rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise. You can just fit those right in there. And you tile as you need to. For whatever material you have. Yeah, so that's fun. Okay, so that was John's project. Andy was next to respond. Thin wood to make fixtures for holding. Do you have a design in mind, or are you just? Okay. Andy was asking how to find out which materials can be cut and which parameters to use. It depends on the machine. So if you're using the laser cutter, you can typically cut. You can cut plywood. You can cut some thin woods. You can engrave on thicker woods. Engrave on different metals. I use it mostly to cut paper, which is nothing for the laser cutter. As far as the parameters, a lot of times it's trial and error. For wood, I would usually use. I'm trying to think. It's been a while since I've cut on wood, but it was 50 millimeters a second, yeah, 50 millimeters a second, and power 80. I want to say, but again, it's going to depend on the materials. So what I would do is do some kind of test. So let's say that's a cut. Nope. That. Let's say that's a cut, and you also want to see what happens at intersections. So you do something like that. You do something like this, and you cut out a little bit of material just to see how it looks. Trebuchet. Oh, cool. Yeah, you could definitely do, especially if it's like almost like a 2D shape that's extruded. You could do that in Inkscape and a laser cutter, nice and quick. Oh yeah, and I think that trebuchet at MakerspaceCT was done on the laser. I think that was done at Make Hartford a while ago. Okay, so Andy had the. You wanted to do wood shapes, fixtures for holding. So I'm thinking something like a. So when you say fixtures, I'm thinking like a lock of some kind. So I'm gonna hit this maybe 10 times. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is probably enough. 6, 7. Do something like that, and you might have a nice lock. Here's a cool thing. If you're trying to get fixtures inside of one another, like the kerf of the laser might not be enough. Like this might be too snug of a fit. One thing you can do, there's a couple things. I can click this and click here it is, inset. So notice the hotkey here, Control left parenthesis. And it pulls it in at a set rate. So kind of 1 pixel at a time, which will allow it to kind of fit in nicely. Now it's taken into account the width, the stroke of the thing, so we can set the stroke to something really small. There we go. Depending on the material, that might be a snug fit. Who knows? If you want a dynamic offset, that's what this is. Control J, and this you can drag in or out. It's going to round the corners if you offset it too much, but that can be fun to play with also. The process that I did for getting the exact thing here, the shape here, is I drew a rectangle. I know that there's the hole under here that I need. I'm going to click this and duplicate it. So Control D. Select these two. So right now I've got two different shapes, but I'm keeping my original. So I select that one, and I do a difference function. And now I've got that puzzle cookie cut shape. Another way to get this, maybe you don't like the dynamic offset, maybe the curves don't work for you. If you click the fill button, you can fill a bounded area. And what it's going to do, it looks identical, but slightly rounded edges. You could always double click, Control A to select all the points, and make all of those segments straight by clicking this button here. And this is slightly smaller. And you can set how much smaller you want it to be by, I've still got this right here. I'm going to set this to, I don't know, 3 points, something like that. Delete it, and it's going to remember those settings when you go back and do it again. Now, oh wait, sorry, wrong way. I have to change this to a wider thing, and it's going to take into account the stroke of that, and you can see that that's quite a bit smaller, and you can set that to whatever stroke width you want to try to get as much fill as you want. You can do some fine tuning there. And then I would still go in, make sure everything's straight for whatever puzzle piece you're trying to get. Here's another thing. You see how this isn't exactly straight? Sometimes when you do these sorts of things, it comes up with nodes that are sort of in the middle here, and that can be not great. So you can go in and clean up the design a little bit. Right now I only have the vertices. I can Control A, make everything straight again. And then you see how this isn't direct 90 degrees down. That can be a problem. Align and distribute, when you're in node mode, it changes what you have available. So right now I only have these 4 things available. If I click this, that makes it so that those 2 nodes are directly on top of each other. It just kind of snaps them. You can also do a horizontal. You can do different distributions there. Set that. Everything looks pretty clean. There's that. So Andy, is that useful to you? Cool. Anyone else? I don't know. Oh, hold on. Laser only cut all the lines. Good question, John. So you can cut, you can also engrave. So usually I reserve red for cutting and a green outline for engraving. What's going to happen here, as long as this is a bounded polygon or curve of some kind, it doesn't have to be straight edges. As long as this is bounded, the laser is going to go back and forth like this, and it'll cut very quickly and just kind of remove the top layer as an engraving. But you can set all those in the laser program. But for design purposes, I like to keep my color coordination because it keeps everything organized. Let's see. If John's drawing had nothing but the shape, could that be used directly with a laser cutter? So you're talking about this. If this were nothing except this is actually the only thing that we want. We just want the boundaries. Does that make sense, Andy? That's oh, you mean if this were nothing but the fill? Ugh. It's kind of weird because this it doesn't interpret this as a shape. Out Inkscape. Oh, the PDF. I don't know. I genuinely don't. Just because I know Inkscape so well, I would probably pull it in here and use that. But that's just me. You can definitely try it. You know, if you or if John thinks that he could just use it straight from the PDF, that would obviously save a number of steps. David had a bring images into Inkscape and transfer to Fusion 360. Cool. Yeah. Before I get to David's, some save as. There is. You can save. Can you see this pop up? And you can export as a DXF. You can export as that's the big one, DXF. SVGs are your typical ones. Yeah, DXF, PDF, if you're into that. Cool. So. David wanted to bring in the images to Inkscape. Okay, so this is a fun function. File format that's needed for the DXF. That's the one I've had the most success with. So usually what I do for bringing in images, you want a fairly simple image. I'm going to present something else. This window. And I'm going to look up Sherlock Holmes silhouette. I used this some years ago. I was making a phone case using Inkscape for. I wanted the back of the case to have this silhouette, and the text would say the case of the cell phone. You know, it's Sherlock Holmes. It's funny. It's okay. Kill that off. Thank you. Thank you for humoring me there. There's that window. Back to Inkscape. Okay, so I'll drag that straight into the desktop. I'll just use the settings that are already there. Okay, this is not a path. This is not a object. This I can't change this at all in any way other than like squishing it or skewing it. Right? But I can turn it into something that Inkscape can use. If I sent this to the laser cutter, it would have no idea what to do with it. We go to Path and Trace Bitmap. There's this pop-up that comes up, and I'm just going to keep the same settings, whatever's the default. Click OK. And it looks like nothing happened. But something did happen. It duplicated it, and this duplicate, it places it right on top. This duplicate does have plenty of nodes. And I can give it a border, fill, border, fill, and I can play around with this as I need to. Sometimes when you drag things in, you'll get a lot of nodes. And if you're okay with a little distortion, you can simplify it. You can see it did that. You can simplify it again. Maybe you can go in and clean that up, make it a little nicer, but I think the original one is nice. You'll notice there's a couple of loops here. There's actually this outline curve here, and then there's these two that are separate. This little holes in his cap here. If you don't want those for whatever reason, you can go in, just straight up select those and delete. If you do want them, but maybe you want them in a different place, you can go to Path and Break Apart. And everywhere where there's a disconnect, everywhere where there's a loop that's not connected with the other one, you can move them around and do what you need to do. Even give it a little fill if you wanted. But I'll just delete those, nice and easy. So David, does that... Yeah, that's a question. I don't know. I genuinely don't. With the Makerspace, eventually we'll get through this whole stupid virus thing. And eventually things will start to open up again. Yeah, I don't have anything else to tell you, John. Sorry. I don't have access to the space either. So normally I'd say, yeah, just send me a file if you work on it. I'd be happy to do it next time I'm there, but no go at this point. Let's see. Basic object. I'm looking through to see if anyone else had any projects they wanted to work on. I can show you some of the projects that I've worked on in the past. So I'm working with a couple of the Makerspace people to make face masks. So outside of this, I'm an origami artist. I typically use the laser cutter for paper. And working with the origami community to design a face shield. Absolutely, Andy. Yep. That is exactly what I do. So there's a lot of going back and forth to the original design, do a test on maybe some cheap material. Okay. Yeah. To some extent, yeah. And actually, this whole design is a cheat because it's there's plenty of cuts. So it's origami inspired, but it's not origami proper. So everything that's a red line is a cut. This was a first test. Talking with Joe, is the guy at the Makerspace that I was working with remotely. These are all a little closer. Basically, the idea is the tabs, these arms would come out and go around the head, and the tabs would fit into each other and lock. And you can do as many tabs as you need to get a good solid block on there. We played around with some different curvatures, and I think we settled on this as our final thing, which looks a lot nicer. And so the idea is it wouldn't be for a laser per se, it would be for a mass production die cutter of some kind. You make the die and you just stamp, 100 of these a minute, 1,000 of these a minute, and then send it off to first responders in a flat form that they can just assemble in the middle of it and take 2 minutes and tie it around the head and do what they need to do. So we'll see how that goes. Literally, we were doing tests of this. I'm in my studio and Joe was at the space. We were doing tests of this up until I started this class. Let's see, what other fun things are here? I design a lot of board games and card games. And I use Inkscape off of that. So bear with me a sec. Do you guys play any board games or card games? Do you know the game Race for the Galaxy? It's kind of a lesser known card game, but yeah, that's okay. One of my favorites though. So I was designing a sort of an expansion to it, and I did that all in Inkscape. Here we go. You got some rules that would be printed up. None of this would have been done on the laser. This is just to export as a JPEG, and then you can print up as you need to. But every piece of this was an object or something designed in Inkscape. So for example, I'll take this Chancellor token. I'll show you how that was made. You can see as I ungrouped it, there's a whole bunch of different pieces here. There's a circular overlap with 85% opacity, so you can kind of see through it, which I thought looked kind of neat. In this game, there are 5 phases corresponding to each of these 5 symbols. So those are all, these are all 108 degrees or 72 degrees off the center, which I was able to use a pentagon and use a little bit of math and some geometry to find the center point here. I suppose you can call them radii, the centers, the segments between the center of the polygon and the vertices, and then you can center this along all of those and get your things here. This program absolutely can be made better if you have if you're fairly strong in geometry. And then there's just layers of circles, and you get this cool little token, which could absolutely be taken to the laser cutter with some changes. And you get this slick little thing with some rules written in there. In this case, it would just be cut out of thick cardboard or cardstock. So that's kind of cool. There's a lot that can be done with that. So I said I'm origami artist. A lot of my modern designs, a lot of designs that I have nowadays are designed in Inkscape, including this series. So I told you that I used the laser cutter for paper a lot. This is one of the designs. And I don't know if you can see it from where you're sitting, but these lines don't actually all connect at a single point. So this all goes back to designing for your material. I'm using paper, and I know that if the laser goes over the same point multiple times, it's going to cut through the paper where I just want to score. So I have to actually backtrack the laser or the lines so they don't all connect. And it's still good enough to get a good connection there. I'll show you how I do that. Back to that. Okay, so let's say I've got a design that looks like this. Boom, boom, boom. And maybe creases that go like this. Back and forth, back and forth. And this would be definitely a foldable design of some kind. Now I don't want these all intersecting at a single point. So what I'll do is I'll select everything that's maybe the shorter of the lines that go into an intersection. And I'll use the transform, apply to each object separately, and do probably 99%. There we go. That's good enough. And now the laser won't go over the same point multiple times, meaning it has a consistent cut all the way through. But another way to do that is to select them all, combine them. Now it considers this all in one object. I'm going to take this, I'm going to give it a new color just so you can see it a little easier. I'm going to step that off a little, step that off a little. Do something like that. Something like that. I'm just eyeballing it. There are definitely ways to make this a little more accurate. But here's a cool function. If I select a line and I go to Edit, Select Same Stroke Color, it'll select all the lines that I've got purple in the document. So if I had purple somewhere else, I could do that. I'm going to combine all of these. So now I've got two combined paths. I've got this sucker, and it considers this all one path. And I've got this sucker, and it considers that all one path. And I can cut and remove excess material. And there you go. So that was a little bit of an advanced technique, but over time you can combine multiple of these functions together and get some pretty good results. All right. Let's see. Amerta, I haven't heard much from you, or Westport Makes. What do you guys want to use the laser cutter for, or the Inkscape for? Was it Amerta? Cool, cool. Similar project with shields. Open source. The open source face shield. Okay. Yeah, there's a bunch of these floating around right now. All plastic. Yeah, multiple sheets. No, I mean these are good. These are good. Okay. Okay, so the way I go about this is are there files here? Links cut. Yes, there's a PDF. So the way I go about doing this, if I wanted to cut this out, yeah, lost it. Bear with me. Save as. Nope, that's the HTML. Can I just save it as a file to my computer? What is going on? There we go. All right, my monitor was acting up, so I couldn't actually see where I was clicking. Title is Open Source Face Shield. Where? Hold on. Sorry. Let me just yell at my computer a little bit. Face Shield 1. There we go. Okay, found it. Sent. Okay, and we've got all of our other projects in here. Face Shield 1. Just bring it in with basic settings. Yeah, this should be good to go right from the get-go. The only thing I'd say is, let's say you've got a piece of PETG that's, I don't know, 24 by 48, and you want to tile everything on here. Yeah, it's probably unreasonable. 2 by 3 feet. Then you'd probably break this apart. Make sure that this is all grouped, and yeah, it looks like it is. You can always, if you select multiple things, go down here and you can see there's 4 objects selected. So if I move one of these, I'll probably leave something behind, which I am. I think that's just... Oh, I lost one of these. Okay, so that wasn't grouped entirely. So I'll have to make sure to select and group. So now if I move this, I'm not leaving anything behind. Group that. Those 2, now it's only 2 objects, so we're good. Take this, that, maybe do 2 of those, maybe 3 of those. Something like that. And now you've got a good setup to do 3 face masks out of one cut, depending on the dimension of your materials. So yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So Amarita is, yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Okay. You got about 25 minutes left. I don't really have much more to cover other than just, practice all the things that, I hope you guys have been following along and tried the hotkeys out yourselves. By and large, it's difficult to learn a program like this unless you have a project in mind, because then you'll learn whatever you need to. Yeah, John, definitely. Thank you for joining. You'll learn whatever you need to for that project. The more projects you do, the more pieces that you do. Andy asked, cuts and scores. How do you make a score? Actually, it's the same as a cut. So usually what I do, we'll go back to this. If I want to cut this out of a piece of paper, this paper goes beyond this, so maybe I want to cut out multiple from a sheet or something like that, but I want the border to be actually cut out. I usually leave the scores as black. Something like that. And then I'll send that off to the laser. Oh, sorry. Okay. I went back to this zigzag form. Okay, you should be able to see it now. For my own color nomenclature, I use red for cut, black for score. The laser doesn't actually differentiate between cuts and scores. A score is just a light cut. So when you send this off to the laser, the program will say, they'll see the red border, they'll see the black border, and you can set the settings of the laser for different things for different colors. So I might set the red border to a power high enough to cut through my material, and then the black lines will be shy of that. It'll pull back the power, or it might go faster or something like that. For reference, I use the paper I use the most is a bookbinding paper called Elephant Hide, and for cuts I use 70 millimeters a second and 18.5% power. For scores, I use 70 millimeters a second, 15.5% power with a minimum of 13.5. What the minimum does, the laser is going to go across this line from the edge to the edge, one way or the other. But as it gets to the end there, before it moves off to the next thing, it's going to be over the end dot, the end point, slightly longer than the rest of it. If you set a min power, it'll actually taper off as it goes to it'll pull back the power just slightly, so you get a more consistent line. Keeps the ends from being burned. So these are typically the settings I use it at, and I might make some. Yeah, oh yeah, definitely trial and error. A lot of that. Cardboard, wood, plastics, they're all going to have different settings depending on what you're trying to do with it. So yeah. Any other questions? All right. Trying to think what other cool things I can show. Oh, extensions. Extensions. So this is a big thing. One of the big powerful things of Inkscape is the fact that it's open source and available. Like, you can go in and edit the code. So for example, if cool, I'm sure still sharing. If I wanted to, I could open up this SVG. Instead of an Inkscape, I could open it in Notepad, and I would see all the code. Test materials. That was a good question. So Westport Makes asks, how do you source or test materials for laser to avoid toxic glues? Mostly just research. The big nasty one is Lexan. So if you're using plexiglass, you just want to make sure that it's not the brand name Lexan. Like that's pretty bad on with the laser. Most plexiglass is perfectly fine though. There are different ways to test it. I don't know them off the top of my head. That's a good question. I don't know. I genuinely don't. I think research whatever material you're looking to do. There's a Makerspace. Hold on. Safe tools laser cutter. There was a makerspace somewhere. ATX Hackerspace. Here we go. This is a really good reference. Wonder how up to date this is, because I've been using this for several years. This was from some makerspace and somewhere else, but I've come across this before, and it's just a really good resource for your general things. I guess it's always good to err on the side of caution. If you're not sure, probably best don't use it. But really, it's just very specific things that give the laser an issue. Okay. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so extensions. What are the maker devices? Oh, CNC router, definitely 3D printer, and actually that's a good segue into extensions. So there's a program out there called Openscad. Vinyl cutter, yep. I'll show you my web page. Openscad is a free 3D program. You can design in here. It's a lot of coding. You don't actually manipulate the 3D figure. You code everything. So you do something like cube at this size in this position, cube at this size in this position, Boolean operation between the two. It can get a little hectic. But there's actually an extension you can download from Inkscape called Inkscape to Openscad. Go. Come on, go. What's going on? Close out of some of these tabs. There we go. And you download this, and it does exactly what it looks like. You take a 2D shape and you export an Openscad file, and you can set the height of whatever it is. It'll extrude to the third dimension, and you can 3D print whatever you design in Inkscape. So that's pretty useful. But as you're exploring, you can explore a bunch of these extensions by this drop-down. All of these things. I use the mirror one quite a bit. This is one that I downloaded. Somebody actually made the Python files and then put it on a forum, and I'm like, okay, I got to grab that. And it's exactly what it sounds like. I've got a line here, got a line here, and I'll duplicate this one, select the second one, mirror, give it a second, and it mirrors the first line over the second line. And I duplicated it so it would keep a copy of the original where it initially was. You can use this to, say, render a gear or a gear pairing. Where did it? Ew. It put it way down there. But there's a gear pairing, and it just generated that. Might not need all of that, but it's got all the points that I need to. If I wanted to use Openscad, I could extrude that in the third dimension, make it as thick as I wanted it. Or I could do just a single gear. But these are all extensions that you have to go and download and get them into the file, into Inkscape. Where did you put that? There it is. Jesus. I think my scale's a little off here, but there we go. There's a gear. And you can set the, whoever designs the extension will set the parameters for it. In this case, you can set the pitch, you can set the number of teeth, that sort of thing, which is kind of nice. So how do you actually download an extension? There's a whole big repository of these things online. It would be useful to know how to do that. So, Inkscape extensions. There's a whole bunch of these, and you can peruse around them, see what might be useful. Some of them are more just fun than anything. Ooh, Openscad cookie cutter format. That's cool. Okay, so to actually do this, what you're going to do, let's say you want to take this one. You would download somewhere. Nope, that's the license. Download. Ah, there we go. There's the button. Sometimes you have to play around with these things. Open up the zip file, and I'm going to stop sharing that screen so I can show you the zip file screen. In here, you'll find a .py and a .inx file. And these two files we're going to drag to the desktop and then eventually to our Inkscape program folder. I'll show you where. There. Cookie cutter. Those. So we're going to drag that into this PC, Inkscape, share, extensions. You've got all those. You drag the .py and the .inx files right in there. Now I've got cookie cutter and what was the other one called? It's called something slightly different, but it had the word cookie cutter in it. But I've got those extensions in there now. If I restart Inkscape, I'll actually save this. Drawing -1. Present. So I'm back to my original file, except now I've installed this new extension, which was called, what was that called? Openscad cookie cutter. Maybe I can export it, save as. Maybe I should actually read the description to see how it works. Remove all object fill. Make outer. Save as Openscad cookie cutter file. Cool. So I'll do that. I'll remove all fill. Give it a red border, like the thing said. Save as. Openscad cookie cutter file. That's pretty cool. So that'll open as a .scad. So in the free program Openscad, you could then export that as an STL for the 3D printer. And so that's a kind of a crash course in how to install an extension and use it. All right, Andy. Yeah, thank you for joining. And yeah, I think I'll call the class there then. Unless Westport, do you have any other thoughts before we? All right. Good. Feel free to email me if you have any other questions. Yeah, I'll see you at future classes. Take care.